speaking of kind of evolving and like the evolution of representation and power, how do you see marginalized communities evolving their approach to achieving that equity?
Yeah, I think that one evolution of that approach is something that we talked about earlier in this conversation, which is historically anywhere in the world, if you were in a marginalized group, your goal was to gain entry into the group that was oppressing you. And I think more and more in BIPOC communities, in queer communities, and Indigenous communities, there's a realization that you don't want to be part of that club. That actually inside of these marginalized communities, there's so many gifts that could be offered to the larger culture, ways to live, ways to govern, ways to make decisions, ways to be generous and think of everyone in the community, ways to include each other. And so I think that becoming self-referencing as these communities and as individuals in these communities, rather than sort of judging the success of your quest for rights in terms of have you gained entry into the place that into the larger structure that was keeping you out and oppressing you and telling you there was something wrong with you or that you were less than. I think that's really the evolution, is that rather than being at a deficit and hoping we could get in the door, we're building our own buildings and saying it's warm over here. This is another way to live. Mm-hmm. Come check it out. And it's compelling, and I think that really, as grassroots organizations and as Indigenous societies and BIPOC communities, there's so much to be learned from larger culture, and larger culture is massively devolving. It's a train wreck. Mm-hmm. And so I think there's the larger culture is starting to look over and going, wow, we've definitely not made a go of this. Is there another model? And I think these communities have that model.
Absolutely. Kind of what you were when you were speaking about that, what immediately came to mind is the marginalization of the Black community in the United States, and how over the years, in trying to gain equity and entrance into the overall, whether you want to call it the white community or the status quo, so to speak, they've been denied so many times, but also developed their own community and their own culture that they literally now is referred to as like the culture. And it's become kind of the driving force in American culture. A lot of music, a lot of art, a lot of just everything now comes from the Black community, which is historically the most, it's like the poster boy for the most marginalized community in the United States. So I think, think there's like a guiding light there for the queer community as well, seeing how that, it's history repeats itself in a way almost.
Yeah, well, certainly I think that BIPOC communities enjoy varying degrees of visibility at varying points in history. But I think what we can know is that those marginalized communities are always contributing significantly, whether it's women in the age of kings, or queer people, in ancient times who were, creating the text and the art. I think that it's great to enjoy those moments of visibility, but also great to just recognize that history is often written in a way that skews towards a certain narrative of those in power and is not accurate in crediting the evolution and rich elements of culture that all of these marginalized communities over thousands of years have contributed to. So yeah, no, I think absolutely those moments of visibility are amazing, but I think just a general awakening to the systematic nature of human society and of the world, the world as an ecosystem, and how we all contribute, and how every element plays a role is important, because there's a way that as certain parts of society enjoy a moment in the light, we are sort of aggrandizing the centralization of power that disenfranchises, community after community, the animal world, our water, our air. And so, I think that it's great to look at those moments where those communities get a moment in the sun, but also great to say, as queer folks, maybe we're going to embrace a different quest, which is not the centralization of power. It's not for queer people to be king, or BIPOC people to be king, or women to be dominant over men, but for us to live in harmony with our environment and with the whole spectrum of expression of humanity.
Yeah, that's really well put. It's really, I do like that lens that you put that through. Just that, just that it's because it's been done a certain way in the past doesn't mean it has to be. It's every community is its own community, and it will develop in a way that is authentic to itself. And also, like what you said about just because you don't maybe have the spotlight or the recognition, there is still a level of equity, even if it's not being recognized historically. You spoke of many different artists who are queer, part of the different BIPOC communities. So I think that's also important to remember, is it's always been there in the background, even if history hasn't reflected it that way.
Absolutely.